YOLO Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about the distortion in the filter modules inside of the generator section of Phase Plant, specifically why they're so cool, because we already have a distortion unit and a filter unit, so why would we need these over here? What's the differences? Well, let's go over some of the basic differences, and then we'll look at examples. So first off, audio rate modulation. You can do audio rate modulation with these modules. It is not possible in the effects lanes. There's no way to do that. These can only be controlled via modulators, where here you can take the signal output and use it to modulate other stuff. We get that very filtered sound. This might not be something that I want. In fact, it's not something I want. It sounds dull, but I didn't want the open filter. There's just that extra high end, which you can see visually here. I was not interested in that. So I moved it back to a spot I kind of liked. But I wanted to bring back some of the high end, just not in the same way. So when you have something like that you want, it's usually a good idea to try out some different kinds of modulation. You might be surprised. So I decided to take the distortions output and modulate the cutoff knob. And I get back some of that high end. Then I just dial in the cutoff where I want it. So that's pretty cool. So that's one reason, audio rate modulation. The next reason is modularity. So you can indeed move these around, but you can't like hit a certain part of your signal chain before another part. Like let's say I had another signal source and I wanted to have control over the order that these went in. Because sometimes a distortion can make a massive difference to the sound. Actually, a lot of times it can. So for example, I could put the distortion at the end of the chain. I'd also need to move the output to the bottom. And now what I'm doing is I'm filtering this output, layering it, and then distorting everything together. Or I could put the distortion first, and now I'm taking only this output, distorting it, filtering it, and then adding it with this layer, and you can see a little plus icon. So in order to get that kind of flexibility, like in most sense, it's simply not possible. You would need something like Reactor in order to do this, which is significantly more complex. So this is a really, really cool, powerful design for distorting things in process. Now, I'm not going to be demonstrating some sort of a layered patch today. Today, I just want to demonstrate some basic stuff. But if I go ahead and play a note, oh, let's get rid of these too. So if I play a note, and I could go ahead and change the filter order so that it's filter then distortion. And this can have a massive implication, not only because you could say we could do that over here, but you can't do that with audio rate modulation going on. And that's what makes it so powerful. Now let me show you a bit of why this audio rate modulation stuff's so cool. So if I were to go ahead and take off this modulation here, this is just a filter, right? And it's a low pass filter, assuming you know about filters and things. Sound and Synth Basics is a course I have where I talk about this if you don't know. So if I play a note, we get that very filtered sound. This might not be something that I want. In fact, it's not something I want. It sounds dull, but I didn't want the open filter. There's just that extra high end, which you can see visually here. I was not interested in that. So I moved it back to a spot I kind of liked. But I wanted to bring back some of the high end, just not in the same way. So when you have something like that you want, it's usually a good idea to try out some different kinds of modulation. You might be surprised. So I decided to take the distortions output and modulate the cutoff knob. And I get back some of that high end. Then I just dial in the cutoff where I want it. And it's a lot more controlled, and it's not that high-end, like, ear-piercing stuff that it was before. So that's one reason why you might grab this instead of a filter unit on the outside. So this offers us coloration options that are not available. I'm also using it to do some phase modulation. So you can see over here, this move is an interesting one, because if you notice, I'm also accomplishing what seems like pulse width modulation. Like if we look at the waveform, and the way I'm doing this is I'm driving it through an LFO that's got a bias on it. So I'm sort of pulling double duty with this. But that's the distortion in the filter module inside of here, and just a couple basic things that you can do with it. Again, it's one of those things that it doesn't seem like a crazy amount. Like these are very simple units to work with, but that's sort of the beauty of it, that they're so simple to work with and easy to move around that they make creating patches a lot more straightforward than otherwise would be. So for example, let's open up, let's sort of flesh out the patch a bit more. Let's try adding in a layer. So I'm going to add in an analog oscillator. I'm going to leave it as a saw wave. I'm going to stick it before the filter. And that's really nice. Now let's try it out before the distortion. I don't like that as much. Actually, it's pretty all right. But I prefer this a little bit more. Now again, if we get rid of this cutoff modulation, that's what we would have had. So again, one reason why, hey, you know, this filter right here, this is pretty legit. Also, it's just handy to sometimes just shave things off here and there in the middle. So now what we're going to do is let's go ahead. I want to add a chorus to this. An ensemble could also sound cool. I want to bring the depth, I'll leave that where it's at, the rate down, the spread down, bring up the taps to 2 and the delay down. Yeah, it's nice. Okay, a filter here would probably be a nice thing to have. Let's push these to their more extremes, and we'll just use them as sort of colorations. We'll bring the Q down too. Yep, and now let's go ahead. I would like to experiment with a comb filter. I think that would sound pretty dope. So comb filter. And I'm going to link that up to the same LFO. And we're going to move this way up. We're going to bring the LFO down. Oh, that's pretty cool. Let's try one more distortion for the road. Just see what we get out of this. Foldback provides some of that nice high-end sort of gargly stuff. Now this is extremely loud, so we'd have to dial it back some. I gotta say, I like fold back the most. That's also why we're here. Make this a monophonic patch. Very nice. And I think I'd call it right there is just sort of this crazy low end distorted saw wave. That's really what it is. Now let's try taking advantage of some of the various things we can do here and just experiment a little bit. So let's go ahead. Let's try putting the distortion after the analog. Oh my goodness. If we move it before again. I might actually, if I were to like work with this in a track, what I would do is I'd make 2 layers. One with this and one with the other. And then I would change out parts with them. So they'd be subtly different. I'd also want to see what the filter sounds like up here. So we get a way brighter sound. That's because the distortion is going through unimpaired. So we might instead actually add another filter. And this one would just be to sort of tone things off at the top here. And let's move this filter here and take our other filter without the modulation and put it down here. Let's instead make it a low pass. And away we go. If you have any questions about this, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.